listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11 Monday through Friday. Joining me right now is Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Welcome.
Hey, Martha. Great to be with you.
So we are a family-owned company, been around 75 years. We just reopened where we started on the square in Gainesville, and we're one of those towns that it was growing, but boy, COVID just threw gasoline on it, and we are booming now. Wow. So it's a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. Great to be there. And it's a great time coming ahead of us because, we're here at the RNC. We're feeling very excited about our prospects of President Trump being elected now and us retaking the Senate for the Republican Party and growing the House majority. So we'll have unified government, and I think what can be a very unifying time for the country, and we're going to get this economy going again. So it'll help all these small towns and communities that are rebuilding.
So you said unified government, and we've had that a couple of times before in the last 20 years, and not a lot has been done. So my big thing, as I told you before, is the budget and getting it done on time and getting some of this COVID spending out. Are you encouraged, that you can't guarantee it, but are you encouraged that if we can do this, we can actually get the work done?
I am, and my big thing is the budget as well. And my experience has been since 2017. I came to Washington at the same time President Trump did, and we did have unified government. But you know what, Martha, no one knew that we would. And so I showed up as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed freshman, and I went to our Speaker of the House at the time, was Paul Ryan, and I said, hey, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. Where's the plan? Oh, we're working on that. See, the thing is, everybody thought Hillary was going to win and not Donald Trump. So to be honest, in hindsight, we all lament that we wasted the first probably 2-3 months of the 115th Congress in 2017. We are not going to be caught flat-footed again. But budget and spending is a big, big priority. Why? Because the national debt is our greatest threat to national security. And we've got to get serious about this. Part of it is being a good steward with spending. It is ensuring that we handle it the right way. As Congress, we have a very important role to play in all this. And part of it is the process itself, and that's what you're alluding to. Since I've been at Congress, and far longer than that, the Congress has not done its job. There's supposed to be 12 separate appropriations bills. There's supposed to be a lot of thoughtful debate and discussion and working together to ensure that we make this a budget that makes sense. And you can't do that if you govern by omnibus, and that's what had happened. By atrophy and by complacency over time, Congress just morphed into this situation where the Senate would jam the House right before Christmas every year with a massive omnibus spending bill that just has all this stuff and is 3,000 or 4,000 pages long. No one reads it, no one debates it, no one has a chance to improve it. The way to do that is to break it down and make the process work as individual bills. I'm happy to tell you, before we left to come here, we had gotten through in the House 70% of federal funding. We're doing the individual appropriations bills. We got more to do, but we're trying to rebuild that muscle memory, and I think it's a really important part of this process.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% on that. And, the Senator Isaacson had this bill that he never was able to get passed, but it was called a biennial budget bill. And I always tell the people that are driving and listening, don't take your hands off the wheel to laugh. We can't even pass one budget. How are we going to pass two budgets? How are we going to do that? But it wasn't a bad idea, actually. Texas does that, and you do oversight in the off years. It's not bad at all.
There are a lot of good ideas out there, and we're actually working through the process of debating and discussing those right now. I mentioned that we're in a couple of interviews this morning that we're working on a very aggressive first 100 days agenda for the new Congress, because we will have, I'm convinced, President Trump in the White House, and we'll have the majority in both chambers. So the House and the Senate need to work together on these things. What a concept. That hasn't happened either in a long, long time. And so I'm spending a lot of time with my Republican Senate colleagues talking about this. How can we reform that? This is a time for us to go big, to think big about how to change this and how to restore fiscal sanity, fiscal responsibility in Washington, because that is an animating principle for our party. It's part of our core principles, unlike the other team who thinks government can never be large enough and you can never spend enough. We're the opposite. And so we need to implement plans and policies that will do that, and it takes a lot of planning to do that well. And that first 100 days of the Congress, I think you're going to see a lot of things change pretty dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, my sense always was that I think that the President Trump thought that people would oppose him, but after he got a little bit done, that people would come along, and it never happened on the Democrat side anyway. And so I think he's a little more wary of that this time, and he knows he's got 4 years to get it done. Now, of course, we had a huge event that happened on Saturday. Tell us, a little bit about where you were and then what's next.
Well, I was in Louisiana. We were preparing some things in my district to head here to Milwaukee, and we were actually had it on television on the big screen over our shoulders while we were working, and it happened, and we all stood and froze. It's one of those moments you'll never forget. We're so grateful. I mean, clearly, it's undeniable that God worked a miracle there. I mean, spared President Trump's life. One little thing, one little second, one little movement different. We're having a different conversation today. So President Trump feels that as well. And he's been talking about that the last couple of days, day and a half, recognizing the providential moment there, divine intervention that was obvious to us. I think he takes that very seriously, and I think it was a moment that hopefully can unify the country. You even heard President Biden talking about that. We made the point that it should not surprise anyone that this happened, because the Democrats' rhetoric has been so heated for so long. Just incessantly, they've insisted that Donald Trump is Hitler, that his election will end the country. Democracy is over. They all say it. They all do it. They've effectively invited violence upon him, and I think everybody's taking a pause and breathing now and realizing that that's true, and that needs to change. We got to turn the temperature down. Let's have a battle over policies, not personalities, right? That's what the country is built upon. That's what the system anticipates. But if we can't have thoughtful debate and not regard the person on the other side as our actual avowed enemy and the enemy of freedom and all the rest, we're going to have more and more political violence. We can't do that.
I'm old enough to remember that you didn't use the word Hitler to describe anyone. Right. There is no political opponent in this country, regardless of how much I disagree with him or her on their policy, that is a Hitler.
Hello.
Okay?
Right.
And to use that statement, it so often, really denigrates what we had to do. My father was a World War II veteran. He was a POW during that war. I just find it horrific, and we got to get back to a better way of speaking.
Well, that's right. I remember the days of Reagan where Tip O'Neill was the Democrat Speaker of the House, right? They had a famously strong friendship. They didn't agree on anything with regard to policy. But when Reagan was the attempted assassination on his life, the first person to visit him in the hospital was the Democrat Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, because he had such respect for him, And we got to get back to that. The people in the building are not our enemies. Our enemies are like, the terrorists who are trying to take us down, Hamas and Hezbollah and people like that. Our colleagues inside the building are fellow Americans, wrong-headed as they may be. If we're happy warriors, we can change their minds, and that's what the process anticipates, and that's what we're trying to get back to.
So you were the unexpected speaker, and we'll kind of follow that. It's not something I don't think you intended to do. It was kind of where you ended up being. I think if I remember correctly, you voted to keep Kevin McCarthy in the first round, I believe. Yeah. I think you did. So how has it been? Because it's catapulted you and your family into a place that you probably thought you'd never be.
This was not on my bucket list. It's not something I anticipated. And but look, we were ultimately elected unanimously by our Republican colleagues. It's the first time that happened in a long time. I think people just recognize we need stability. We need unity again. We needed it in the House. We need it in the country now. And we're just providing steady leadership. There's kind of a magic to being the unlikely speaker, is that, we can surprise people and we stick by our core principles that we always have. I don't owe anything to anybody, right? I'm just trying to advance what I believe. I call them the 7 core principles of American conservatism: individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, human dignity. I think those are the foundational principles of the country, and we do well to preserve them. Reagan said in his farewell address, he said, they call me the great communicator, but I really wasn't. I paraphrase him. He said, I was just communicating great things. They're the same great things that have guided our nation since its founding, and we are the stewards of those things. I believe that to my core, and I think that's what's going to guide us through these tumultuous times that we live in. I'm excited about the days ahead. I'm excited about Georgia. Georgia's been switched from a I think it was down the middle of the road. Now it's lean Republican. I think we're going to win Georgia. And
oh yeah, we're going to win Georgia. We are not a purple state.
Yeah, that's right.
I may be wearing purple today, but we are not a purple state. We are going to be a red state. Well, sir, I know you're on a very tight schedule, but I want to say, just personally, there were a lot of people right after the first vote on the budget and all that stuff, and they just wanted to throw their hands up and try to do things. A couple of people from Georgia maybe said that, but I said on my show all the time, look, this guy is dealing with a really tough situation, and he has been truthful through the whole thing. I think we need to give him more than a couple of months to figure out what he's going to do.
Thank you. Newt Gingrich, another Georgian, Newt posted an op-ed 7 weeks ago. He said, Johnson has the most challenging speakership since the Civil War 160 years ago. And he was talking about our small margin, the fact that I got there quickly, and then we had a 1-vote margin for 4 months. So it was virtually impossible. But we got through it by God's grace, and now we got better days ahead. We're going to have a larger team, unified on the vision, unified going together. We're really excited to fix all these great challenges that are facing our country right now.
Speaker Johnson, thanks for being with me today.
Thanks so much. God bless.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
It's always great to talk to Senator Katie Britt from Alabama. How are you?
I am doing wonderfully. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on with you, and obviously I'm in front of your listeners.
Yes, so tell people about you, because they probably saw you in the State of the Union response. They saw you last night on the convention, but they might not know much about you.
Yes, so born and raised in Alabama, daughter of 2 small business owners, wife and mom. I am the youngest Republican female ever elected to the Senate and the only Republican female with school-age kids. And so as I work every day in the Senate, I work for our values, for our people, and also bring the perspective of what it's like to raise kids in this environment, whether it's you're talking about safety, security, whether you're talking about the economy, whether you're talking about the challenges that social media present for our young people. So obviously being a voice and a fierce advocate for moving this nation forward.
So are we finally passing the torch to a new generation? I mean, look, I can say this because I'm old. I got my Medicare card, I'm starting August 1st, and it's fine. But you've got J.D. Vance, who's got 3 children. Vivek Ramaswamy's got small children. You're starting to see this. And look, I relate to this when I was a young mother. I have 4 children. And how I got involved in politics was I was driving around doing the mom thing. And listening to talk radio and feeling like people weren't talking for me.
That's right. And Martha, that's it. So that's actually what drove my husband and I into this race, is we looked around and we don't recognize the country and feel like if our generation doesn't step up and really fight for the next generation, there's not going to be anything left for them to fight for. And so that's the voice, that's the perspective, that's the energy. And I think you're seeing it all across our country, right? You look at COVID and look at moms and dads and parents who finally said no, and got active in school boards. So whether it's, working in communities, running for city council, running for the U.S. Senate, I think we all know that we have to step into the arena. Now is the time. There is too much at stake to sit on the sidelines. And so I want all of your listeners, whether it is politics, whether it's being involved in their church, whether it's being involved in the community at large, it is time to step up, to be engaged, to give, to contribute to this nation, to contribute to the future of our children. We have so much at stake. I believe this is the greatest nation ever known. But when we look at where we are in decline under Joe Biden. I mean, it doesn't matter what category you want to rate him on. We have gone down significantly. We are diminished in decline under his leadership, and it's time to put our nation back on track.
So I was talking to my daughter this morning. She's 31. She's just gotten married. She doesn't know. Her and her husband are in that group where they're making good money, but they don't know if they're going to be able to buy a house.
That's right.
They were looking for a house until Joe Biden got elected, and then interest rates went up.
That's right.
And now the money they have saved, which is a big chunk of money, isn't enough for down payment and the new interest rates and, all of that kind of stuff. So she said to me, Mom, after what happened on Saturday, it makes us look really bad as a country. She says, we're supposed to be the best country in the world.
We are.
And when things like this happen, it makes us look bad.
It does. So 2 things. First, let's talk about where we are in the economy and what your daughter said. She's exactly right. So we've got a couple of issues here. Obviously, Joe Biden has done nothing to really drive down prices. We've got to be both energy independent and energy dominant. Energy affects everything. When you're looking at housing in
Every
particular,
price. Yes.
this has been the regulatory regime of Joe Biden. The administrative state is out of control. The overburdensome regulations that this administration continues to quickly put on people, all everyday Americans, we're paying the price. So 24% of a new home price is actually directly attributed to regulation. So you look at that, you look at mortgage rates more than doubled, you look at rent skyrocketing. I mean, you can't win in Joe Biden's America. Then let's talk about Saturday. What a sad day for our nation. It is heavy. Your daughter is exactly right. In my 42 years in life, it is the darkest day in American history because you think about where we are. I mean, I think we all need to pray for our nation. Obviously, pray for President Trump and the safety of his family. Pray for those that were injured. Pray for all those affected, and certainly pray for the family who lost their heroic, father and husband, father who died just as he lived as a hero. But we really have to pray for our nation. I mean, this is a time that we need to come together. We need to remember who we are.
And whose we are.
And whose we are. That is exactly right. We are one nation under God, indivisible, and we've got to get back to our roots, to our Judeo-Christian values that obviously set forth who we are as a nation. We can't shy away from that. We got to keep our eyes on him, and that's how we're going to get this country back on track.
So you're going to laugh at this because my husband's brother and his family live in Huntsville, and
that's
so
wonderful.
I was sending them pictures from that. They were asking me, "How's the RNC going?" So I'm sending them pictures. So we'll get a picture later, and we'll talk about that. But he says, "I don't recognize anybody in these pictures," and I said, "Hopefully he'll recognize you when I send you that."
Okay,
but he said, I said, but you're that voter we need.
Mm-hmm.
He votes. Mm-hmm. He votes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He's just working. He's not involved every day. He's not following it every day. I talked to the lady in the hotel I'm staying in that served the breakfast. Yeah. She's never voted in her life, and she is not registered to vote.
Wow.
Okay. And she said, I don't know anything about voting. I said, you don't have to know anything. Find a place to get involved.
That's right.
Something you care about.
That's
it doesn't have to be everything. I think that's what intimidates people.
That's
when
right.
you watch something like this, these are people that are involved in everything, right? I mean, they just do everything.
Right.
And so it's intimidating to the average person.
Absolutely.
But she said to me, I really don't like President Biden. So I said, you really do need to register.
Yes, you do. And listen, I want your listeners to do exactly what you're saying. Get engaged. I mean, don't be overwhelmed by the fact that there is too much to do. Just go do something. And when it comes to people voting, I mean, everyone that is listening, if they went out and found 10 people to register to vote, and then I got those people to find 10, imagine the effect that could have. So just realize that all change starts with someone, and you can be the change in your community. You can make a difference. This is going to be an election of a lifetime, and we not only need to take back the White House, we have got to take back the Senate, and then we've got to hold the House, because there's too much at stake not to. And then the moment that we do that, we've got to get to work on day one, Martha. I mean, you look, we've got to secure the border. We have got to drive down prices. I mean, we have got to restore the dignity and respect that people should have for us across the nation. I mean, across the country. I mean, across the globe. It's bigger than that. So we have a lot to do.
Well, and I add to that?
Yeah.
They need to do what they didn't do the last time they had all the power.
Yes,
okay?
Exactly.
And
exactly.
I asked Speaker Johnson, sitting in this chair right here a couple days ago, that's my big problem with it.
Yep.
I'm a Republican. I've been a Republican all my life.
Yes.
Actually, I was a Southern Democrat until I was 28.
Well, there you
Everybody
go.
was. Okay, there weren't any Republicans to vote for. Okay, but all my adult life, all the life I've been paying attention, and I've been so disappointed, especially when it comes to budgets and things like that. I've been so disappointed that when we got all the power, we lost our minds and didn't focus on the important stuff.
That's exactly right. And you're right. And we have to get to work on day won. I mean, the American people, we are asking for their trust with their vote, and that means we've got to do something with the majority. We've got to do something with the White House, and I believe we will. You know, I was honored to be asked to sit with President Trump there in the family box the very first night of the convention. Wesley and I were. There is a focus about him that is different, and he has always been a force, but it is a force with focus. And I have the energy in the arena has been electric. I think people are coming together, not just in our party, but across the nation, because they know what's at stake.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
It is the Martha Zoller Show. We're here live at the Republican National Convention. We're here with John Ashbrook, one of the Ruthless guys. And I keep saying we're going to try to get those guys to Gainesville. You need to come to Gainesville. Georgia's a swing state, and it's the most conservative district in the country. You got to come.
We need to do it, and I think the fellas would love to do it. You know, one of our favorite governors is your governor, Brian Kemp. The guy does such a great job, and I think we're going to talk to him later today.
Oh, good.
We might be playing a game with him. So
yes.
Just a treat to get to know him a little bit.
He's not here, right? He's going to be by phone? Or is he here? Is he coming, maybe?
I'm not trying to break news, but that's what the Martha Zoller Show is all about,
That's
right?
That's right. Well, that's good to know, because some people were wondering, you know, if he was going to come or not.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's and the delegate thing, you know, it's funny because Glenn Youngkin slipped in there to be the head of his delegation. I know a lot of your guys have a connection to McConnell. I thought it was just so bad that they booed him. Do the people here not understand what Mitch McConnell, look, he's not my favorite guy either.
Yeah.
But what he has done for the Republican movement and the judiciary, I mean, the reason why we're in this great position from a judiciary standpoint is because of Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And the other thing about Mitch McConnell that I've learned through the years is he doesn't care that they booed him. He literally he doesn't care. He's there to support Trump. He's there to support the Republican Party, and he's going to stand up and say what he thinks, regardless of the critics. And that's actually one of the things that he would say to anybody in politics. Don't listen to the critics so much. You've got to do what you know is right. And everybody is getting behind Trump right now.
Yeah, and I do think that I talk to a lot of people just kind of in the little area out in front of Fiserv, and everybody is very pro-Trump, but then they'll kind of lower their voice and they'll go, but you know, I really don't like it when he does this, and I really don't like it when he does that. And I think that everybody after Saturday is kind of like, well, we need to get behind this guy. And I think Thursday's speech, because they've already done the acclamation and kind of put the ticket together, is going to be really important. And here's my advice to him. You can tell me if I'm crazy. Forget about the people in the hall. You've got them. You've got them, their families, their friends, whatever. Think about going forward past this convention and be as positive and presidential as you can be.
I think that's what we're going to get from him on Thursday night. You know, there are reports that he says he tore up his old speech and he's writing a completely new one, that he is going to call for unity in this country. And he's in a special position to be able to do that. I mean, everybody who's listening to this saw Saturday night, right? I mean, when he stood up and he held up his fist, it wasn't just sort of like it was a historic moment. You know, it's something that that
was instinct.
It's leadership, it's strength. And there was such a contrast in this entire election. There's such a contrast between the weakness that we have with Joe Biden in the White House and the strength that we want from a commander-in-chief. And that's what President Trump projected Saturday night.
And don't you think this whole, you know, the Melania Trump letter, you know, Melania is a less is more kind of person because you don't see her around very much. She's not that involved. But she released this letter that I thought was brilliant because it really humanized him, humanized her, and talked about it from a perspective of, my life could have been changed forever. My son's life could have been changed forever in an instant. I thought it was fantastic because you don't hear much from her.
You don't, and I thought so too. And you know, I mean, I thought last night when he walked into the arena, And it was the first time anybody laid eyes on him, and it looked like he was getting a little bit emotional.
Yes.
And how could you not? You know, he was a quarter inch away from being a dead man. And here he is, and he's looking out, and he's seeing his family, and he's seeing everybody who's, been so close to him through the years. I mean, that's a big deal for anybody personally. Set aside the election and everything else. It was such a cool moment for our country to be able to see him come back. And I don't care who you are. If you're a Democrat, a Republican, whatever, you have seen Democrats on Twitter, hard leftists on Twitter, saying how big of a deal that was, what he did.
Absolutely.
And you have to, even if you don't like his politics, you have to tip the cap, and you have to say, that's what we want in America. That's what we want in a leader. That's what the world needs to see. I mean, he sent a message not just to our country, but to everywhere around the world. He put our enemies out there on notice that if he is elected, strength is coming back to the White House. And that is exactly what Americans want.
Now, you're from Ohio.
I am.
And J.D. Vance was made the VP pick yesterday. Yeah. J.D. Vance has kind of a checkered history when it comes to Donald Trump.
Right.
He did a great interview on Hannity last night where Hannity basically addressed all of those issues, which I think was right for the first one. He needs to go around the country and do that. Yeah. I didn't know he was the guy that actually came up with Never Trump. Hashtag Never Trump. He was Eric Erickson's editor. Eric tells the story today. He was his editor at Red State at the time. Uh-huh. And he says, you need to write this article, but put hashtag Never Trump at the end. See what happens. And it went crazy. So what I love about that is that he changed his mind. And not that he changed his mind toward Trump, but he showed that he's a man that can be presented with the facts. And if he finds out he's wrong about something, he can say he was wrong.
Yeah, and there's a great, I don't know if you saw this, I read the New York Times. I sometimes hate read the New York Times.
Me too.
But you get good information. So there was
they have a great database, too.
They do. And this morning, Maggie Haberman, who is a reporter who is very close, very tightly tied into President Trump and his orbit, she had a story about the relationship and the development of the relationship between President Trump and J.D. Vance. And she led the story with this vignette where J.D. Vance was running for Senate back in 2021, February of 21. He goes down to Mar-a-Lago, and he walks in, and Trump says hello and starts reading all the negative things that Vance ever said about Trump. And he said, you said some very nasty things about me. And J.D. said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Now that I've had more time to think about it, and now that I've had more time to watch how you operate and see what you do if done as a president, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. And I mean, it takes a big man to be able to do something like that. It also takes someone who is not afraid to change their opinion based on the facts. When you learn new things, when time is such an important thing. You can meet somebody, you can have a really good conversation with them, but you really don't know what kind of person they are until you've seen them act in difficult circumstances over time. And when you've observed that, your opinion on somebody can change. It's first impressions matter, but they're not everything. And I'm sure you've seen that through the years.
No, absolutely. I mean, definitely. I've changed my mind about a lot of people over time. I'm sure people have changed their mind about me. Yeah. It is
all for the better.
Thank you. But I think that I feel good about November, but I felt good about November in 2022.
Yeah.
And so we need to make sure that we do the things we need to do to make sure people get out to vote.
No, you're exactly right, Martha. And if anybody who watched the elections in Europe, for example, that just happened this summer in France, there was this ascendant conservative right-wing movement there. Everybody thought that they were going to take over because there's so much frustration with the migration and the violence in their cities, and the left won. And if we are not cognizant of the possibility that Democrats can still win this election, if we're not out there working every day, if people aren't knocking doors, if you're not calling your neighbors and saying, hey, wait a minute, we need a new direction in this country, Democrats can win.
Yeah, they can, because they will get their vote out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you saw the announcement, it was last night, that Elon Musk is going to put $45 million a month between now and the election. And I'm sure other people will chip in now on ballot chasing, mail-in ballots, and early voting, trying to do that. And I think that's positive because what I say to people all the time is we didn't get beaten in 2020 by I don't know why people go after Dominion because we had 3.5 million votes on those electronic machines when we all went to bed. Where we got beaten was the rules around absentee ballots, all of that kind of stuff that was harder to follow. Mm-hmm. We didn't go all in on that. Mm-hmm. And what, I don't believe it was nefarious. I believe they just outworked us, that the Democrats outworked us. I also believe there were a couple of things like Pfizer waiting to announce that they had a vaccine that worked that impacted the election too, but that had nothing to do with laws or anything like that. But can you imagine if in September when they knew they had a vaccine that worked, regardless of what you think about the vaccine, think about where your mind was in September of 2020.
Right.
If that had been announced in September of 2020, it would have been lights out, game over for Donald Trump. But they decided to wait until the 10th of November to announce that. Right. So that was an outside factor that had a huge impact. Obviously, the Hunter Biden laptop being suppressed, we know that impacted things. So I'm glad to see that finally Republicans are getting and Donald Trump, who was against early voting and absentee ballots, he's like saying you got to bank your vote. He's gotten the message. Right.
No, that's exactly right. And what Democrats have done through the years is they have always been effective on early vote. They've always been, not every state has ballot harvesting, but in the states where there is ballot harvesting, Democrats have always had an effective program on that. And in some states, Republicans have had effective programs on that. I worked at Senate races for 20 years, and I worked multiple times in the state of Arizona. And there were multiple statewide races that we ran where we knew we had won the race before Election Day because we banked so much early vote. And so in the states where Republicans are familiar with doing early vote and all of the tactics that are required for that, they can be more effective. And I think that what you've just described, and Elon Musk, a $45 million monthly installment is probably the biggest monthly installment that's ever been paid out in anything in American politics. Huge commitment. But the fact that they are focusing on early vote, absentee ballot chasing, that is huge, huge, huge for our chances in November.
You were in Delaware when this happened. What was your first reaction?
The first reaction was, my God, look, there's so much violence now, the way we talk about it. The whole notion that there is this, there's no place at all for violence in politics in America. None. Zero. And
it is the Martha Zoller Show. I just can't listen to that guy anymore. It is just, he just doesn't mean anything that he says, And I met him in 2008. John Ashbrook is here with me today. I met him in 2008 when he was running for president for a minute back then, I think in Iowa, I think is where it was. And, he's just not very nice. And he does get into your space. I was interviewing him, and he's moving closer. I'm moving back just to make, he's moving closer. He's that kind of guy. You know, he just doesn't respect people very much. It doesn't strike me. People think he's so nice. I don't see that at all.
What kind of a politician goes to Iowa and runs for president and leaves people with the impression that he's not very nice? For crying out loud, aren't you? That's where you're supposed to be. I tell you,
I met
friendly.
Rand Paul that week too. He was helping his dad. Yeah. Okay, and Rand's an interesting guy too. Yeah. He's a little bit difficult. I don't know if he's on the spectrum or what it is, but he's smart sometimes a little too smart. But I do love his budget plan. Yeah, where he says we need to go back to 2019. Yeah, adjust for inflation. Yeah. And then, surprise, we'd have a balanced budget.
Yeah, he's got a lot. Rand has a lot of ideas. He's an eye doctor.
Yes,
so he's got a lot of ideas on healthcare. He's got a lot of ideas, basically, on anything you can think of. He's got an idea for it.
So we're live from the Republican National Convention, and we're here with John Ashbrook. And I think I told you I have two kids that live in Lexington, Kentucky, and they married best friends from Lexington, Kentucky, and they married into Democrat families. So, I have to, listen to a lot of stuff, when I'm up there visiting,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. My sons all vote Libertarian.
Oh,
you know,
do they
they're
really?
the
Okay.
kind that say, why can't people, they say, if 70% of people say they don't want either one of these candidates, why won't they stand up and vote for another candidate? That's the way they think about it.
Makes some sense.
And that's okay. I'm glad they vote. You know,
Yeah.
I'm happy they're out there. But I do think it is, Rand Paul, I think he does a good job. He's got some great ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked every person. I had Mike Johnson sitting in this chair right here yesterday, and I said, I know you say you want to control, the House, the Senate, and the presidency again, but how do I know you're going to actually do anything? Because the last 2 times we did it, we did not maximize it. We wasted opportunities. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And he feels confident that this time we can get the kind of budget work done, and that he's got, he feels very encouraged.
Well, I think, first of all, I think that's the operative question, right? It's like, if we win this election, what's it for? And, there are a lot of big things on the horizon next year. There's remember that big Trump tax cut? Congress is going to have to redo that to keep
and
a
no
lot
tax
of those
on
things.
tips.
Right, exactly. So, but if we don't have an operational majority in the House, and even if Republicans hold on to the majority in the House, which is an if, we're not guaranteed to hold on to it, but of course, Trump does better, Republicans have a better chance. But even if they hold on to the majority in the House, it's probably going to be narrow. It's probably going to be, the 3-4 seats, sort of like we have right now. Hopefully they can get more, but I think that people should sort of expect narrow majorities for the next decade, because that's just how the districts are drawn. And a narrow majority is difficult to manage. And so for a guy like Mike Johnson, he has people with all different kinds of perspectives within his own conference. Everybody says Republicans aren't diverse. I just would like to introduce you
to a meeting.
House Republicans, because they all have different ideas about how to do everything. They're all in charge. And so he's going to need cooperation from people. And, the way you get conservative things accomplished is you don't just say, I need 100% of it and I need it right now. You take, maybe I get 75% of what I want. And at least you get down the road. At least you get tax cuts. At least maybe you get the no tax on tips, something like that. You get something. And so it's not only the House, obviously, but the United States Senate. Republicans need to pick up 1 seat if Trump wins to have a majority. I think we're going to actually get 3. West Virginia, this guy named Jim Justice, who's the governor there, big guy. Maybe you've seen Baby Dog.
Yes.
He's going to win that race. So Republicans are already at 50-50 for next year. The next best race is in Montana. There's this guy named Tim Sheehy. He's an American hero. He's running against John Tester, who's been there too long and lived a charmed life as a Democrat in the Senate. I think we can win that race. And I think we can win in Ohio. Republicans have this guy named Bernie Moreno. He's running against Sherrod Brown. That's my home state.
That would be so
and
great.
I think Bernie Moreno, in a state where Donald Trump won by 8 points in 2020, the year that he came up short, he's going to win by even a greater margin now. And I think that Bernie Moreno is going to go with him.
Yeah, and Sherrod Brown went to Twitter yesterday and we still call it Twitter because it's just more fun, Twitter yesterday to bash J.D. Vance. So it was, it's not smart. It's not smart.
It's not smart. And by the way, I'm very happy with this J.D. Vance pick, because I'm from a town outside of Cincinnati called Hamilton. And the town just north of Hamilton is Middletown, where J.D. comes from. And his story, I think, is so emblematic of so many people in the state of Ohio who have been overlooked. It's not just big cities in our state. It's the same as Pennsylvania. It's not just Philly and Pittsburgh.
Absolutely.
Michigan's not just Detroit. Those states are made up of small and mid-sized cities that are full of people who have been overlooked their entire lives, counted out their entire lives. And now we have a guy who is in the we will have a guy who's in the executive branch, providing a voice for so many people who just, I think, everybody says the forgotten man, and it just kind of rolls off the tongue, and you just kind of forget what it means. But the people don't feel like the government works for them. They feel.
And you drive an hour out of any big city, and you find towns like that.
Right.
You find towns like that. So Rhett asked this question. I'm here with John Ashbrook. He said, Joe Biden just says he didn't watch it, meaning the debate. Mm-hmm. That's a rhetorical trick such that the interviewer can't ask questions about it. I'm sure he watched it. He just will not admit it because he doesn't want to answer questions about it. What do you think?
I think that's probably true.
How could he not watch it?
Right. Right.
It is like watching a train wreck, but
right. I think that's probably true. He at least saw clips or something, but we know that his honesty has been suspect for his entire career, so I don't know why he would all of a sudden tell us the truth today.
Yeah, he's so obsessed with saying, what about the 28 lies that Trump told? Well, here's what I say about that. He told the one, quote, big lie that no service members died on his watch, so everything else is negated after that. To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.